on October 12th, I guess, a couple of days after the bombing started, Bush publicly announced to the Afghan people that we will continue to bomb you unless your leadership turns over to us people who we suspect of carrying out crimes, although we refuse to give you any evidence, probably because they don't have any, and we dismiss without comment the offers of your leadership for negotiations about extradition. Notice that that's a textbook illustration of international terrorism. That is, by the U.S. official definition, that is the use of the threat of force or violence, in this case extreme violence, to attain political ends through intimidation and fear and so on. That's the official definition. This is a textbook illustration of it. 3 weeks later, by the end of October, the war aims had changed. They were first announced, as far as I can find out, by the British Defense Minister, Sir Admiral Boyce. Admiral Boyce, the British Defense Minister, he informed the Afghan population that we will continue to bomb you until you change your leadership. Well, that's an even more dramatic illustration of international terrorism, if not aggression, and that was the goal that was followed. This had nothing to do with finding the criminals and bringing them to justice. This is a totally different issue.
If the United States is a leading terrorist state, if, as you say, Britain is another example of a terrorist state, how do you distinguish between that kind of what you describe as terrorism and what they are saying, Osama bin Laden, who's a terrorist? Make the distinction.
It's very simple. If they do it, it's terrorism. If we do it, it's counterterrorism. That's a historical universal. You go back to Nazi propaganda, say. Most extreme mass murderers ever. If you look at Nazi propaganda, it's exactly what they said. They said they are defending the populations and the legitimate governments of Europe, like Vichy, from the terrorist partisans who are directed from London. Okay, that's the basic propaganda line. And that's the way it works. If somebody else carries it out, it's terror. If we carry it out, it's counter-terror. I think perhaps one of the most dramatic examples right at this moment is a place where I just was a couple of weeks ago, southeastern Turkey. Southeastern Turkey is the site of some of the worst terrorist atrocities of the 1990s. This is the Kurds.
Attacks on the Kurds.
Attacks on the Kurds. Left a couple of million refugees. Much of the countryside devastated. Tens of thousands of people killed. Every imaginable barbaric form of torture you can dream of. It's all well documented in Human Rights Watch reports and so on. How did they do it? Well, they did it with a huge flow of U.S. arms, which peaked in 1997. In the single year 1997, in that 1 year, the arms transfers to Turkey from the United States were higher than the entire Cold War period, up until the insurgency started, the counterinsurgency started. But look at the way it's treated. Look at the way it's treated. This massive international terrorism, run and supported by the United States, is considered a great triumph of counterterrorism. So if you read the State Department reports on terror, they praise Turkey for its success in showing how to counter terror. You read a front page article in the New York Times, praises Turkey for showing how to deal with terror. Turkey was selected as the country to provide the forces for what they call the international force for Afghanistan. Actually, it's for Kabul alone. It's Turkey that's being offered, is being paid by the United States extensively to carry out the repression of terror, thanks to their achievements in countering terror, namely by carrying out some of the worst terror of the 1990s, massive ethnic cleansing and atrocities, with U.S. support. Now, this is a real achievement of the intellectual culture to be able to do this. But it illustrates very well the answer to your question, terror and counter-terror. If some enemy state did this, I mean, we'd be, not just outraged, we'd be bombing them. They are the military occupiers. Palestine isn't occupying Israel. And this isn't just started now. It's going on years ago. I mean,
so does that, in your mind, justify
the
suicide
bomb? No, it does not.
Of
Of course not.
It doesn't.
It doesn't in anybody's mind.
So it invalidates both sides.
those who defend suicide bombing, and there are very few, don't have a leg to stand on. Those who defend the Israeli atrocities, including the U.S. government, most intellectual opinion, a good bit of the West generally, yeah, they don't have a leg to stand on either, and they have a much weaker position. We're back to Turkey again. So let's take the Powell mission. Powell is praised because he's such a wonderful diplomat. He succeeded in, he went to Yasser Arafat, who's imprisoned in a dungeon where he can't even flush the toilet, and he extracted from him a statement condemning terror. Did anybody suggest that Powell should have asked Sharon to condemn the Israeli atrocities? Did anyone suggest that Powell ask George Bush to condemn the fact that he's been sending Israel the Apache attack helicopters, which have been devastating Jenin?
But the UN's been condemning
Sorry.
them anyway.
Oh, no. You didn't understand my point. Did anybody suggest, can you find a word in the press anywhere, or anywhere, that suggested Powell should have requested a condemnation of Israeli terror from Sharon and of U.S. backing of that terror from Bush? I mean, that's a thought that couldn't enter anyone's mind. And the reason is because our profound commitment to terror and violence, when it's committed by our clients and by ourselves, that is so deep that we can't even think of the question. In fact, it was articulated by George Bush's favorite philosopher, Jesus Christ, who pointed out, famously defined the notion hypocrite. A hypocrite is a person who focuses on the other fellow's crimes and refuses to look at his own. That's the definition of hypocrite by George Bush's favorite philosopher. When I repeat that, I'm not taking a radical position. I'm taking a position which is just elementary morality.
But even if he is a hypocrite, and
not he, everyone.
Okay, even
Let me ask another question. See, here's an experiment. Try to find a phrase in the massive commentary on September 11th which is not hypocritical in the sense of George Bush's favorite philosopher. Find one phrase.
All right, but
I don't think you can do it.
Okay, but before, I don't want to get Gnostic here and religious on it, but I do want to...
This is not religion. This is elementary morality. If people cannot rise to the level of applying to ourselves the same standards we apply to others, they have no right to talk about right and wrong or good and evil.
But let's talk about even Robert Kaplan, who writes about foreign policy. I spoke to him recently about his book, Warrior Politics, and I put some of your points to him. He said about the distinction between the terrorist states that you call Israel, America, and the terrorist states that America calls the Taliban. He said, I wish Noam Chomsky had been with me in Romania in the 70s or the 80s, just one of the 7 or 8 Warsaw states with just one of the 7 or 8 prison systems with 700,000 political prisoners. Adult choice of foreign policy is made on distinctions. The argument that Chomsky makes has no distinctions because there's a difference between the quantity and the kind of dictators that America supported and the quantity and the kind of things we went in communist world for 44 years.
Okay, so let's take his example, Romania, Ceausescu, hideous regime, which he forgot to tell you the United States supported. Supported right till the end, as did Britain. So the example that he gave is a perfect example, and it's a small example, because we support much more brutal regimes. I gave an example in southeastern Turkey. Several million refugees, tens of thousands of people killed, a country devastated. That's rather serious. Nobody accused Milosevic of that in Kosovo. East Timor, we supported, Indonesia. Was one of Suharto was one of the worst killers and torturers of the late 20th century. The United States and Britain supported him throughout. He's our kind of guy, as the Clinton administration said in 1995. Horrible atrocities. In fact, when he came into office in 1965 with a coup, the CIA compared it to Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. It led to total euphoria in the United States and Britain, massive support. When he carried out even worse comparable atrocities elsewhere, the couple of, hundreds of thousands of people killed then, hundreds of thousands later, full support, continued right through the end of his rule. in fact continued past his rule. In late 1999, when they were rampaging and destroying what was left of East Timor, the U.S. and Britain continued to support him. And I can continue through the world like this. Kaplans can't understand trivialities. The triviality here is that nobody except the ultra-right-wing jingoists like Kaplan is comparing atrocities by various countries. What honest people are saying, this seems to be incomprehensible, is that we should keep to the elementary moral level of the Gospels. We should pay attention to our own crimes and stop committing them. This would be true even if we were killing one person. Okay, and it's even more true when we're killing millions of people.
Let's bring it to the bigger picture than just because the question, he says, we all agree with the Gospels. This is, and then
he doesn't. He doesn't.
But he says,
certainly
look,
does.
I believe in a Hobbesian world. This is what he says.
So is he saying we should overthrow
the? It's nasty. If you leave people alone, they'll kill each other.
Yeah.
And that's why what you need, was he calls, is an organizing hegemon, an overweening power,
which is always us.
Yeah, which is always us, he says.
Right, because we, and why is it us? Because we have the power. And we have a massively subservient intellectual class, of which he's an illustration, which will support U.S. atrocities no matter how awful they are.
But he says this is real politics, that Chomsky's off in another land with his gospel, that he says, look,
forget gospel. I'm talking about the most elementary morality. If a person doesn't understand that, they have no right to talk. Okay? If you don't understand that you pay attention to your own crimes, you have no right to talk.
He talks about Machiavellian virtue. Sometimes we do a bad thing to protect our democratic and our good institutions and a just society.
Yes. Now, how are we protecting our democratic institutions by supporting mass slaughter in southeastern Turkey in the last few years? Was that supporting our democratic institutions?
Was it supporting
our democratic institutions?
Not ours, but
anybody?
Would Kaplan argue that the nation-state has a right to use any means necessary to protect its sovereignty?
Oh, then he's justifying Milosevic. He's saying Milosevic had the right to do anything he wanted to repress the Kosovars in Albania. Is that what he's saying?
Do we need a constabulary, a force, a central force? In this case, it's America because it's the superpower, to sometimes use unjust means in the service of just causes.
What are the just causes? What was the just cause in, for example, slaughtering Kurds in southeastern Turkey? What was the just cause? What was the just cause in supporting Suharto when he killed a couple 100,000 landless peasants in Indonesia, went on to become one of the biggest torturers in the world, and then slaughtered a third of the population of East Timor? What was the just cause? What was the just cause when we invaded South Vietnam 40 years ago? This is the 40th anniversary of the public announcement of the U.S. attack on South Vietnam, ending up killing millions of people, leaving the country devastated, they're still dying from chemical warfare. What was the just cause? What was the just cause when we fought a war to a large extent against the Catholic Church in Central America in the 1980s, killing hundreds of thousands of people, every imaginable kind of torture and devastation? What was the just cause? Can I continue? Yeah, the just cause for people like Kaplan is we did it. Therefore, it's a just cause. You can read that in the Nazi archives, too.